Okay, let's talk about three incredible voices from American history, each fighting a very different kind of battle. You've got a president, Abraham Lincoln, standing on the blood-soaked ground of Gettysburg. You've got a pastor, Martin Luther King Jr., writing from a jail cell, figuring out the moral strategy for her revolution. And then you have a writer, Sherman Alexie, fighting for his own life on the Spokane Indian Reservation.
I mean, at first glance, they seem worlds apart, right? A president, a pastor, and a poet. But what if they're all part of the same long-running American conversation? A conversation about what it means to be free and what it really takes to win that freedom. That's the big question we're going to dig into today.
So we start with Lincoln. It's 1863. The Civil War is just tearing the country apart. And he gets up at Gettysburg, and he's not just there to dedicate a cemetery. He's trying to redefine the whole point of the nation. He's basically saying this war is a test to see if a nation conceived in liberty, a nation built on equality, can even survive. For him, the fight is for the soul of the country itself.
Now, jump forward about a century, and you've got Martin Luther King Jr. He's in the middle of a different kind of war. There are no cannons, no armies in the same way. The enemy is unjust laws and this deep, baked-in hatred. So his focus isn't just on why they have to fight, but how. He puts the moral and strategic choices right at the center of the whole civil rights movement. And then there's Sherman Alexie. He brings this epic, centuries-long struggle down to the most personal level you can imagine. His fight wasn't on a battlefield or in the halls of government. It was inside his own house, at a school, in his own head. For him, the whole struggle for freedom started with one simple, desperate act: learning how to read.
All right, so to really get these three, we first have to understand their arenas, because for each one of them, the battleground for freedom looked completely different.
And this is where you see the huge difference in scale. For Lincoln, the struggle is national. He's fighting to keep a nation from literally tearing itself in two. For King, it's societal. He's not fighting a specific army, he's fighting, in his words, an unjust system and all the oppression that comes with it. And then for Alexie, the struggle is intensely personal. He's fighting against the crushing weight of low expectations, the idea that as a Native American kid, he was supposed to fail, supposed to disappear.
So if the battlegrounds are that different, it totally makes sense that the weapons would be too. Let's look at the specific tools each of these thinkers believed was absolutely necessary to win their fight.
Lincoln's speech is famously short, but his call to action is huge. He says, look, we can't really dedicate this ground. The soldiers who died here, they already did that with their lives. The real weapon for us, the living, is dedication. He says it's for us to be dedicated here to the unfinished work that those soldiers started. It's a passing of the torch.
King? Well, he's a master strategist. Before he tells us what to do, he lays out what not to do. First, there's acquiescence, basically just giving in. He calls it the easier way. Sure, but also the way of the coward. Because if you passively accept an evil system, you're actually cooperating with it. The other rejected path? Violence. He admits, yeah, it can get you momentary results, but in the long run, it's a dead end. It just leaves everybody blind and creates even bigger problems.
So, if you can't give in and you can't use violence, what's left? This is where King drops his game changer: nonviolent resistance. He describes it as this brilliant middle way. It agrees with the violent person that evil must be resisted, but it agrees with the person who gives in that you shouldn't be physically aggressive. It's a way to fight injustice without becoming unjust yourself. Pretty powerful stuff.
Now, for Alexie, the weapon is something completely different, but believe me, it's just as powerful. He tells us that as a little kid, before he could even really read, he understood the idea of a paragraph, and that concept became his key, his tool for understanding not just books, but his entire world.
The way he builds this metaphor is just incredible. So first, a paragraph is a fence that held words. It's a little structure, a container for ideas. Simple enough? But then he starts applying that logic to everything. The reservation, it's a paragraph inside the bigger story of the United States. His family's house, that's a paragraph on the reservation. By learning to read paragraphs, he was actually learning how to take apart his world and figure out where he fit.
And this is the gut punch, the powerful conclusion to his whole idea. Reading wasn't a hobby for Alexie. It was an act of survival. It was his weapon against the world telling him he would fail. But it doesn't end there. Now, as a writer, he uses that exact same tool, not just for himself, but for the next generation of Native kids. He's trying to save their lives too.
So, we've seen the battlegrounds, and we've seen the weapons. But what was it all for? What was the ultimate goal? What did winning actually look like for each of these thinkers? Let's check out their visions for the future.
For Lincoln, victory was about two big things. First, a new birth of freedom, basically recommitting the country to its founding promise of equality. And second, the simple survival of democracy itself, making sure that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, doesn't just vanish.
King's vision is less about political structures and more about the human heart. His ultimate goal, the thing you get through nonviolence, is creating a community at peace with itself. The endgame isn't just about beating your opponent, it's about winning them over and building a society where the real fight is between justice and injustice, not between people.
And Alexie's vision, wow, it's so beautifully specific and personal. For him, victory isn't some grand political statement. It's the image of young Native kids in a classroom looking at him with bright eyes and arrogant wonder. It's seeing them grab that weapon of words, reading and writing, not just because they have to, but because they get it. They know they are trying to save their own lives.
So what happens when we put these three voices together? You start to see they're not just isolated figures in history. They're all part of this one long, continuous conversation about America's unfinished work.
The common threads are just impossible to miss. Every one of them confronts a massive struggle, national, societal, or personal. Each one of them identifies a specific, powerful tool for that fight, be it dedication, nonviolent resistance, or the written word. Each gives us a clear vision of what a better future could look like. And maybe, the most important thing of all, every single one of them understood that the work is never really done.
And that leaves us with one last big question. Lincoln used rhetoric, King used moral strategy, Alexie used literacy. They each picked up the most powerful tool they had to fight for a new definition of their world. So the question for us, here, today, is this. What is the unfinished work that still remains? And what is the right weapon, the most powerful tool that we need to pick up to finally complete it?